The story. The Train Cabin Murder. Our story today is about a woman named Butena. She was married to a man named Ahmed, who was a well-mannered, respectable person. And she was likewise a virtuous lady. She had 4 children with Ahmed. And their life was very happy and their financial situation was excellent. One day, back in the year 1989, she received a letter stating that her mother was very ill and that she must come visit her immediately. At that time, they didn't have easy means of communication like phones, especially since her mother lived in a southern village where phones weren't available, so people used to send letters. She knew her parents were elderly and that her mother suffered from several illnesses. She became terrified for her. And reading between the lines of the letter, it felt as though her mother was saying, "Catch me while you can, my daughter. I want to see you because I feel I am going to die." She started crying and went to her husband. He told her, "Go ahead and travel. I will stay with the kids," especially since it was the school season and the kids had responsibilities. He said, "Go. May God ease your journey on the train." They had a train that could take her all the way to the city in the south. He promised to take care of the kids during her absence. She thanked him for his support, packed her things in a suitcase, and he drove her to the train station. Long story short, he told her to wait a bit in the waiting hall while he went to buy the tickets. When he got to the counter, he requested a private cabin for his wife because she was traveling alone. His wife was conservative, deeply religious, and covered from head to toe, so she preferred privacy, especially since public places like trains and buses get very crowded with men. He insisted on a private cabin, which were like small rooms available on trains back then, and still are today. The ticket for it was a bit more expensive, but he said he didn't mind, paid the fare, took his wife and boarded her onto the train. He settled her into the cabin, made sure she had her suitcase and everything she needed, and she thanked him, saying she would message them as soon as she arrived. He said goodbye, left the train, got into his car, and drove home. The train started moving, and Butena sat there thinking about her mother, hoping she would make it in time to find her safe and sound. She was also sad about leaving her children. As you know, when traveling, your mind wanders and thoughts come and go. While Butena was lost in thought, someone suddenly knocked on the cabin door. Surprised, she turned around and saw a woman who was fully covered and modest. But she seemed broken, sad, or anxious. In a trembling voice, the woman said, "Please, my sister, can I sit with you in this cabin? The regular seats back there are extremely crowded with men sitting next to each other. I asked the ticket conductor, and he told me you had booked this cabin all to yourself. I am actually getting off at the very next station, which is quite close." Since Butena's destination in the south was still far away, she replied, "No problem, please come in and sit down." The woman sat down and remained completely silent without uttering a single word. Butena eventually looked away and went back to daydreaming about her children, watching the cities, farms, and houses pass by out the window. After about half an hour, the train stopped at the next station. The woman who was sitting next to Butena stood up, opened the door, and walked out immediately, silently, without saying a word. She got off at the station, and the train moved on again. Now the ticket conductor has to check all the passengers after every station to see who has a ticket, who is riding without one, and who is inside the cabins or on the seats. That is his job after every stop. He was making his rounds, passing the first, second, and third cabins. When he reached Butena's cabin, he knocked on the door but received no answer. He knocked again. He knew that cabins usually held either a family or a lone woman, so he couldn't just barge in, he had to give her a chance. He knocked a first, second, and third time. Still no answer. He thought, "Let me leave her. Maybe she is asleep or tired. I'll check the cabin next door and come back to her." He finished his work and returned to Butena's cabin. He knocked again, but she didn't open. Legally, if a passenger is inside a cabin and doesn't answer after multiple knocks, the conductor has the right to open the door to see what is going on, as they might have been harmed or fainted. After knocking repeatedly to no avail, he opened the door and was shocked by the sight. Butena was lying on the floor. At first he thought she had just fainted, which happens sometimes during travel. He stepped inside and tried to move her, but there was no breath or movement. He lifted the cover from her face and saw her eyes staring blankly. Then he looked closer. She was wearing all black, but he noticed her dark clothes were completely drenched in blood. The woman was dead. He immediately notified the train captain, who in turn alerted the security forces at the main station, reporting a murder in a specific cabin. The authorities ordered them not to stop at the upcoming small station but to bypass it and head straight to the following major station, which had a police headquarters. They feared that if the train stopped at the next station, the killer might escape. So they said, "Don't stop. Keep moving to the next station where security forces will be waiting for you." Once the police were notified, the head of the criminal investigation department, a man named Mofid, stepped up. Now, Inspector Mofid had quite a reputation. He was a brilliant detective, but he was incredibly aggressive and had numerous issues at work because of his violent temper. He always had quick, aggressive reactions towards suspects and even his own colleagues, making him unpopular at work. Because of this, he had recently been transferred to the train station police unit just to keep him away from the city and regular friction with citizens. Despite his anger issues, Mofid possessed an unnatural sharpness and extraordinary intuition. They say that whenever he got frustrated or stuck on a case, he would violently tug at his mustache, pulling out hairs. Anyone who saw him would notice patches missing from his mustache. Because of this nervous habit, when he grew enraged, he would even bite his own mustache hair out of sheer fury. Yet, despite all that, no case ever passed through his hands without being solved. As soon as Mofid was briefed, he said, "I'm on it. Just let the train arrive." The moment it pulled in, he ordered, "Not a single passenger leaves. Not a man, woman, child, janitor, worker, or ticket conductor. All of you, come with me." He lined them all up in a hall and began investigating them one by one, taking their names, data, where they came from, where they were going, and their reasons for travel. He left no one unchecked. A security team held them for questioning while Mofid entered the crime scene. He examined Butena and found she had been stabbed with a knife straight through the heart, a fatal blow. Because she was wearing a loose jilbab, the knife wasn't initially visible even though it was still lodged there. Mofid asked the conductor, "Who saw the passengers besides you?" "Come here, do you know this woman?" The conductor replied. "I don't know her. She's just a passenger like anyone else," Mofid said. "Well, give me any details about her. Did you talk to her?" The conductor replied, "No, but when she boarded at the main station, her husband was with her. He was the one who bought her ticket, escorted her to the cabin, said goodbye, and got off. I saw him myself, because initially, I told him there was no need to board, just to drop off his wife. But he pleaded, 'Please, let me just see her in and carry her bags.' I told him it was no problem. He escorted her and then got off." Mofid said, "Great, we need to know this woman's name." They checked her purse, but it contained absolutely no identification documents. Furthermore, names weren't written on train tickets back then. You just bought a ticket and boarded. They were stumped. What was this woman's name? What was her story? Was she married or not? They knew a man was with her, but they didn't know if he was her husband, brother, or someone else. Long story short, they kept searching for her identity and interrogated a large group of passengers, taking their full details and ordering them not to leave town so they could be reached for further questioning at any time. After securing their data, they released them. Inspector Mofid sat there puzzled. He ordered, "Bring me all the staff from the main station, every single employee who has a direct or indirect connection to that train." They summoned everyone who worked the shift at the main station where Butena had boarded. They brought the station workers, the ticket seller, and the train conductor they had already questioned. They even brought the janitor of the station's restrooms. On that day, there was a janitor working the men's restroom and another for the women's restroom. They also brought an outdoor cleaner from outside the station gates and a policeman who was on duty. He left no one out. He began questioning them one by one. He asked, "Did you see this covered woman?" The ticket seller said, "No, but a man bought a cabin ticket from me for his wife, and she was covered. I saw her sitting in the waiting area facing the window, and I saw him go over and give her the ticket." Mofid said, "Good, do you remember what he looked like?" He replied, "Yes, I roughly remember his height and features." Mofid asked, "Do you have any other information that could help us?" The ticket seller said, "Actually, I just remembered something that I found strange at the time, and now I'm starting to connect the dots," Mofid urged. "What is it?" "Speak," the seller explained. "After this man took the cabin ticket, gave it to his wife, and they walked out of the hall toward the train, he returned to me just a few minutes later running. He bought another ticket from me, but this time for the regular economy seats at the back of the same train. I found it strange. Why didn't he buy both tickets together? Why did he buy a private cabin ticket for his wife, escort her, and then run back to buy a second ticket for himself on the same train?" Mofid's eyes widened. So the same man who escorted her came back, bought another ticket, and boarded the train again. The seller confirmed, "Yes, exactly." Mofid then called in the onboard ticket collector. "Are you absolutely sure no man entered that woman's cabin?" The collector replied, "No, none at all. However, a woman did ask me a question. She asked, 'Is there a woman alone in that specific cabin?' I said yes. She then said, 'That's my friend. Can I go sit with her in her cabin? It's better than sitting in the back seats.' I told her if the cabin owner agrees, I don't mind, it's none of my business. If she allows you in, go ahead." The woman was fully covered from head to toe and went inside. That's all I remember. Mofid began piecing it together. Why would a husband board the same train, sit in the back seats away from his wife, never visit her or sit with her in the cabin he paid extra for? Suspicion immediately fell on the husband. Why did he hide his presence? According to the conductor, no man visited her, only that covered woman. So who was this woman who claimed to be her friend? Mofid thought deeply and wondered, could the husband have disguised himself in women's clothing and entered his wife's cabin as that covered woman? The worker couldn't confirm it. It was just a strong suspicion. The husband's behavior was incredibly bizarre. Next came the interrogation of the station restroom janitors. Mofid asked the men's restroom janitor if he saw anything unusual, or if a man matching the description entered dressed as a woman. The janitor shook his head, but he looked hesitant, as if he wanted to say something but was too shy. Mofid snapped, "Come here. Is there something you want to say?" The janitor replied, "I don't know if this helps, but please keep this between us so I don't get into trouble with the station management. I found perfectly clean clothes inside the trash bin in the men's restroom. They were men's clothes in good condition. I'm a poor man and thought I could use them, so I took them home, washed them, ironed them, and kept them for a special occasion since I can't afford new clothes. I was just surprised why a passenger would change his clothes and throw away brand new attire in the trash instead of putting them in his travel bag." Mofid's eyes lit up. "Go fetch those clothes right now." The janitor brought them, and they were indeed almost brand new. Why would someone change in a restroom and throw his clothes away? Mofid took the clothes and showed them to the ticket seller. "Do you remember what the husband who bought the tickets was wearing?" The seller replied, "I don't perfectly recall the pants, but he was wearing a light yellowish shirt." Mofid held up the shirt. "Is it this one?" The seller exclaimed, "Yes, that's the shirt. That's exactly it." Now it was confirmed. The man who bought the cabin ticket, escorted his wife, and ran back to buy an economy ticket was the exact same person who threw his clothes in the men's restroom. After changing his clothes, what did he wear? He must have put on the women's modest clothing to disguise himself as the covered friend. Mofid called the onboard ticket collector back. "When did this woman enter the victim's cabin?" The collector replied, "It wasn't long after we departed the main station. She sat with her, and then got off at the very next stop. I know this because I always check the passengers right after we leave a station, so I am certain she fled at that first stop. Mofid said, "All right, that's enough." Now, they needed to find out who this woman was to identify the despicable husband who murdered her. Inspector Mofid knew he just needed to wait. The husband would eventually have to report his wife missing to avoid suspicion, acting as though she had gone to her family's house and never arrived. Mofid's instincts were 100% correct. After a few days, a man named Ahmed walked into the station to report his wife missing. He said, "I dropped my wife off at the train, booked her a private cabin because she was going to see her sick mother in the south. But she never arrived and I don't know where she is." They asked for his name, and he said, "Ahmed." They asked what his wife looked like, and he described her as a religious, covered woman. They brought in the ticket seller. "Is this the man?" The seller looked at him and said, "Yes, this is him." They turned to Ahmed. "Did you change your clothes in the station restroom?" Ahmed gasped. "What? No. What clothes?" They pulled out the shirt and pants. "Are these yours?" Ahmed denied it. "No, those aren't mine," Mofid replied. "We can check the size. It fits a tall, lean man which matches you perfectly. Furthermore, the ticket seller recognizes you and confirmed you were wearing this exact shirt before you dumped it in the trash and bought a second ticket to tail your wife on the train." "Why did you do that?" Ahmed protested. "That's not true. This employee must be confused. Thousands of passengers pass by him every day." Mofid smiled grimly. "We will find out who is lying." They contacted the wife's parents in the south. "Was your daughter coming to visit you? Did you know about this?" They replied. "No." They asked, "Did you send a telegram or a letter saying the mother was sick?" They replied, "No, never." They confronted the husband. "Why did you lie? Who sent this letter?" They retrieved the letter from Butena's belongings, and it turned out the handwriting didn't match her family's at all. It matched Ahmed's handwriting. Ahmed panicked. "This isn't my handwriting." To secure undeniable proof and break his denial, Inspector Mofid, without any warning, ordered Ahmed's children to be brought in. He had an eldest son around 13 or 14 years old, and 3 younger children aged around 12, 10, and younger. Mofid lined up the 4 children and asked them one single question. "Whose clothes are these?" The children immediately replied, "Those are Daddy's clothes. We know this shirt. It's Daddy's." Children recognized their father's clothes and his taste in clothing perfectly. Mofid turned to Ahmed. "Why do you still deny these are your clothes? Your own children recognize them. Speak up. What is your story? Why did you kill your wife, Butena?" Under the immense pressure, Ahmed completely broke down and confessed everything. He said, "To be honest, my wife inherited a massive fortune from her previous husband. Buildings, lands, villas, and a major company. I am currently the manager of that company and I control everything. But after years passed, I felt like I was just a mere employee working for her personal account. She was extremely careful never to transfer any property into my name or anyone else's. She didn't trust me with ownership, saying, 'I give you management authority, but transferring land, real estate, or the company to your name? Forget it, since my children are minors. I knew that if my wife died, the children would inherit her fortune and I would get my legal share as a husband, which would allow me to gain absolute control over all her wealth. My plan was to take over everything and marry my beautiful, charming secretary at the company," he continued. "So I carried out this plot. I forged the letter claiming her mother was sick and that she must visit her. I took her to the station, boarded her onto the train cabin, and then went back and bought a regular ticket. I changed my clothes in the men's restroom, threw my original clothes away, put on a woman's traditional covered cloak, and boarded the train behind her. Once the train was moving, I went to her cabin, knocked on the door, and entered silently. While she was distracted, I struck her with a fatal stab to the heart. I walked out, got off at the very next station when the train stopped, and believed no one would ever suspect me. I even intentionally stole her identification cards from her handbag to leave her as an unidentified corpse. That is what happened. Long story short, Ahmed was sentenced to death by execution. As for the children of the late Buthaina, may God have mercy on her. They were sent to live with their grandparents in the south after being left orphaned by a monstrous, treacherous father. Despite her marrying him and elevating his status with her wealth, his greed consumed him to the point of murdering her just to seize her fortune and marry his secretary. That is the end of our story. Stay safe, and goodbye.